Hey everyone, Dr. Richard Lai here with Study Acupuncture with me, and I welcome you to this week's episode. And first, I want to say thank you to everyone who reached out via email and via direct message with your well wishes and your positive energy for healing. It really helped me energetically, and I feel like it helped me get a whole lot better much faster. So thank you. So what is this week's episode on? So in this episode, we're going to talk about the differences between a full condition of liver fire and the full/empty condition of liver yang rising. And this request actually comes from someone named Aglaya81. And Aglaya81 said on Spotify, "Hello, thank you for your informative, easy following content. Is it possible to target the difference between the full pattern of liver fire and the mixed of liver yang rising? Please include signs and symptoms, pulse, and tongue. Thank you." And that's actually a really good topic. And I'm sorry for the delay with this one, Aglaya. I just found out how to even read the replies on Spotify. So if anyone is listening on Spotify, there is a poll after each episode. So if you want to interact with me, you can answer that poll. Usually that poll will say, "What did you think of this episode?" But I'm going to start changing it to say, "What other topics do you want to hear?" So if you want to make a request for a specific topic, please reply to that poll on Spotify. Alright, so before we get into liver fire and liver yang rising, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. Alright, and now we're back. So first, let's break out what we have for the liver patterns, because it's always a good idea just to get a general layout of the land so we know exactly what we're studying. So for the liver, we have full patterns, we have empty patterns, and we have full/empty patterns. We also have combined patterns which aren't on this slide. And today we're going to talk about one specific full pattern, which is liver fire blazing, and one specific full/empty pattern, which is liver yang rising. Now these two patterns can be easily confused with each other. And one thing we have to understand about all of these topics is that there's something known as precursors. For example, with liver fire, there are precursors to liver fire, and a precursor is basically just something that comes before it or something that leads to something else. And with the full liver patterns, one example of precursors is with liver qi stagnation, which is a precursor for stagnant liver qi turning into heat, and then finally full-blown liver fire, which is also known as liver fire blazing. And what this means, what precursors means to us as acupuncturists from a clinical sense, is just that with each of these patterns, there's going to be a progression in terms of symptomology and in terms of the severity of those symptoms. So as you go from one pattern to the next, there's usually going to be a progression in terms of the symptoms. So for example, with the whole mechanism of liver fire comes after liver heat. So the symptoms of liver fire are going to be a little bit more severe than liver heat. And where does liver heat come from? Liver heat can come from chronic liver qi stagnation. Because with long-term liver qi stagnation, that stagnation can eventually turn into heat. And eventually that heat can transform into fire. It's just like if you've ever had tendonitis. Tendonitis is an inflammation of the tendons. And what does it come from? It usually comes from overuse. You overuse a joint because you're exercising too much, or you overuse a joint because of the circumstances of your work. Maybe you're required to do whatever, XYZ, and that repetitive motion causes more movement to that joint. And because there's more movement at that joint, that's going to cause the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles to irritate and become inflamed over time. And if that inflammation is unchecked, it's not treated, and the motion that's causing that issue of inflammation continues to go on, that's when full-blown pain, full-blown swelling comes into play. So it's the same with liver qi stagnation. With liver qi stagnation, that qi is stagnating. Eventually, that stagnation turns into heat. If that heat is unchecked, eventually it turns into fire. And there's also a precursor for liver qi stagnation, because liver blood deficiency is a precursor for liver qi stagnation. And you might remember the saying that qi is the commander of blood and blood is the mother of qi. So just simply, if there isn't enough blood, that can cause qi stagnation because qi and blood are so closely connected. Qi is carried through the blood. So if there isn't enough blood, it can stagnate. And now with liver qi stagnation, it can also be a precursor not only for heat, but it can also be a precursor for liver blood stasis. Because of that connection with qi is the commander of blood, blood is the mother of qi. So when the root is liver qi stagnation, when qi stagnates, blood can also stagnate, so that blood can congeal. And that's why liver qi stagnation can also eventually lead to liver blood stasis. It really all just depends on the circumstances for the patient. All right, so first, let's start with liver qi stagnation. Now, with liver qi stagnation, that's when your patient's going to present with things like distension of the hypochondrium, of the chest, the epigastrium, the abdomen. Your patient's going to present with sighing. Your patient's going to present with melancholy, depression, moodiness, fluctuations in their mental state. They're going to feel wound up. They might even have a feeling of a lump in the throat. They might have irregular periods. They might have distension of their breast before the period starts. They might have premenstrual tension, and they'll have irritability. So now here with these manifestations, I have underlined the key manifestations. So these key manifestations are characteristic of liver qi stagnation. So we have distension of those different areas of the body. We have depression. We have moodiness. And then down here, we have a wiry pulse. So if those are present in your patient, those are enough to help you rule in the fact that it's liver qi stagnation. And now the question is, why does all of this occur? In other words, what is the etiology of liver qi stagnation? And the etiology or the cause of liver qi stagnation is primarily emotional stress. When your patient experiences really stressful situations, like they're frustrated, they're angry because of X, Y, Z, they have resentment, they're working so hard, they're working long hours, they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to do this from a professional sense, they have to do this from a family sense, they're being pulled in so many different directions. Those are stressful situations that cause emotional turmoil, and that emotional turmoil causes qi to stagnate. And that liver qi stagnation is what causes all the clinical manifestations that we just went over. So when you, as a clinician, when you're performing your evaluation, you're looking for manifestations and you're looking for these key manifestations, like the ones that I have underlined above on this slide. And those ones are going to lead you to liver qi stagnation. And of course, you're also going to use tongue and pulse for more clues to help you rule in that definitive diagnosis. So if we go over the tongue and the pulse, here's what a liver qi stagnation tongue and pulse would look like. So for the tongue body would be a normal color. But in severe cases of liver qi stagnation, you might see some redness on the sides, and that's the organ indicative area for the liver/gallbladder. And then when we look at the pulse is going to be wiry, especially on the left side. And that's because the pulses on the left side from front to rear are heart, liver, kidney. So with liver being there, if the pulse is more wiry on the left side, then that's all the more proof of something liver related. And then another thing, as an acupuncturist, as a clinician, when you're looking at a patient and you're looking at their manifestations, it's important to look at the patient and their manifestations in a relative degree to other manifestations, meaning look at them in relation to other potential patterns. So, for example, when you look at these manifestations that we went over, when you look at the tongue, when you look at the pulse, did you see any heat manifestations? So when you're looking at your patient, you're looking at their tongue, you see a normal body color. When you look at their pulse, you find a wiry pulse. And in your subconscious, you're seeing, okay, there's no redness, so there's no heat. There's not a rapid pulse, so there's no heat. So that's why it's a stronger conclusion for liver qi stagnation. Now, of course, if it's severe cases, there could be redness on the sides, but then you would look at all the data points because you look at the wiry pulse, but it's not rapid. It's just normal paced. So there's not that much heat going on. When you look at the patient's other manifestations, like do they have redness in the face, redness in the eyes? Do they have scanty urination that's dark? Do they have a yellow tongue coat? Those are all other heat manifestations. So even though you just see some redness on the sides of the tongue, you don't see any other heat manifestations. So that's what I mean by looking at the patient in relative degree to other potential patterns. because if you don't see the manifestations for other potential patterns, that's what helps you rule in or rule out the specific one that you're looking for. So again, just using the manifestations that we see on this slide as an example, when you look at the tongue says normal body color, but in severe cases, it might be red. If it was red, that's an indicator for heat. But here, for this slide, it doesn't say anything about the tongue coat. But if it did and it said yellow, then that would mean heat. And then also with the pulse, what would make it a heat-related pulse? If the pulse was rapid, then that would be indicative of heat. So, being that all of that is absent, it's safe for us to reach the conclusion that the condition here isn't heat, but it's qi stagnation. But we know, based on the diagram for precursors, that liver qi stagnation is a precursor for heat, and that heat is a precursor for fire. Which brings us to the treatment principle for liver qi stagnation. So we know the cause of liver qi stagnation, which is emotional stress. And the effect of emotional stress on the body is that it causes the qi to stagnate, which results in liver qi stagnation. And so that's why the treatment principle that we have here is smooth the liver and move qi. And then we have our point prescription here, which includes points that are going to smooth the liver and move qi. All right, now the next pattern we have is stagnant liver qi turning into heat. And then with this one, it's the next step up in terms of symptom severity. So we keep that in mind as we review this slide. So for the manifestations, we have things like hypochondria or epigastric distension, slight feeling of oppression of the chest, irritability, melancholy, moodiness, propensity to outbursts of anger, a feeling of a lump in the throat, a feeling of heat, red face, thirst, premenstrual tension, irregular periods, premenstrual breast distension, and heavy periods. So we have also here underlined the ones that are the key manifestations. So we have things like of a distension feeling, we have irritability, and we have a feeling of heat. We also have a red tongue, and we have a wiry pulse that's slightly rapid. So already you probably see that if we compare liver qi stagnation and this pattern of stagnant liver qi turning into heat, there's a progression in terms of the severity of the symptoms. Because before, we just had a normal tongue body color. Now look at the tongue. We have redness, actual redness on the sides of the tongue. Before, for the pulse, we just had a wiry pulse. Now we have a wiry pulse that's slightly rapid. Before, in terms of the clinical manifestations, we had irritability, we had distension. Now we have an actual feeling of heat. And then if you look at our treatment principle, it also progressed. So now, in addition to smoothing the liver and moving qi, we also have another treatment principle to clear this heat out. And that's also why, if you look at the point prescription is the same as for liver qi stagnation's point prescription. There's just one additional point there, and that's liver 2. Which liver 2, we know it's a yin spring point. It's the yin spring point of the liver channel. And we know with yin spring points, they help us to reduce febrile conditions, or in other words, heat conditions. And especially with the yin channel, the yin spring point is a fire point. So there's double points there for treating heat and fire in the body. And with liver 2, especially, it would treat liver heat. So I hope you see how the symptoms have progressed here, and even the treatment has progressed from liver qi stagnation to stagnant liver qi turning into heat. All right, now we're at one of the patterns in question of this episode, which is liver fire blazing. So with liver fire blazing, we're going to see even more of an increase in terms of symptom severity. So for example, with liver qi stagnation, we didn't see any red face or red eyes. But now look, we have red face, we have red eyes, we have a red tongue body with even redder sides. We even have a dry yellow tongue coating. And if you compare that to the previous pattern, which is stagnant liver qi turning into heat, we didn't even have yellow on the tongue coating for that pattern. Now, though, that it's fire, everything is just more severe. And that's because the fire is blazing upwards. Fire has a tendency to flare upwards. So that's why we're going to see all of those manifestations of that fire in the head. So that's why we see the red face, the red eyes, the irritability. And then also I have something else underlined here and bolded, which is temporal headache. So this is a headache in the temples. And this headache with a liver fire blazing headache, it's usually a throbbing headache. So just to review the key manifestations for liver fire blazing, we have irritability, we have temporal headache that's usually throbbing, we have a red face, we have red eyes, and then with the tongue, we have a red tongue body with even redder sides and a dry yellow tongue coating. And with the dry yellow tongue coating, it's dry because the fire here has dried up the body fluids. So you're going to see this happen on the tongue, and then you're also going to see this happen with the patient's bowel movements. So the other manifestations, although not underlined, you can see the effect of the fire because you're going to see constipation with dry stools, and that's because the fluids are being dried up. And you'll also see this with the urine because the urine is going to be dried up. It's going to be more concentrated. So that's why you see this dark yellow urine, and that's because of the fire. So where does all this come from? What is its etiology? The etiology of liver fire is coming from chronic liver qi stagnation, turning into heat, and eventually turning into fire. What does that all stem from? It stems from emotional stress that causes the liver qi stagnation. Now, another cause of liver fire blazing can be diet. And that's if you have a diet that's filled with heat-producing things. So for example, if your patient likes to eat a lot of fried foods, or they like to eat a lot of red meat, or if they like to drink a lot of alcohol, those are all heat-producing foods, although very good and yummy foods. They actually produce a lot of heat in the body, and they can eventually cause a lot of fire. All right, so now we can compare liver fire blazing and liver yang rising. Now, with liver yang rising, we talked about it in the previous episode about how it's a full and empty condition. And that means that it comes from a deficiency cause, like, for example, liver yin deficiency or kidney yin deficiency, or even both liver yin and kidney yin deficiency. Or it can come from liver blood deficiency. Basically, with liver yang rising, there's an imbalance between liver yin and liver yang. And that imbalance is what causes liver yang to go up in excess. And that excess liver yang, where's it going to go? It's going to rise up, but it's not going to rise up in the same way that fire blazes up. Because with fire blazing, if you look at it from an 8 principles perspective, fire blazing is a full condition. That fire is fully blazing up. But with liver yang rising, it's coming from an imbalance. It's coming from both full and empty. Empty is the deficiency, like kidney yin deficiency or liver yin deficiency or liver blood deficiency. And that yin deficiency, that imbalance is what's causing the liver yang to be allowed to rise up. So on one side, you have actual full fire blazing up. So you have all those manifestations of redness with the red eyes, with the red face, with the red tongue body, with even redder sides. You also have the yellow tongue coat. And then you also have, because of the fire, its effect on body fluids. That's why the tongue might be dry and the stools also might be dry. And with liver yang rising, it's yang that's rising up. So where's that yang going to go? It's going to go up to the head. So with liver yang rising, you're going to see key manifestations of headache, irritability, and a wiry pulse. And when you look at all the other manifestations here, you're going to see that there's a background of deficiency. Either there's going to be kidney yin deficiency or liver yin deficiency or liver blood deficiency. And depending on what the background is, the manifestations are going to change with your patient. What I have here on this slide is just liver yang deficiency in general. But on these slides, we have more specifics. So for example, liver yin deficiency. And liver yang rising can come from liver yin deficiency. And if it comes from liver yin deficiency, your patient, in addition to all of those liver yang rising manifestations like the headache, the wiry pulse, you're also going to see these liver yin deficiency manifestations, like for example, a dry throat or dry eyes. And with yin deficiency, we have the tongue without coating. And then the next one is liver yin deficiency and kidney yin deficiency. So if liver yang rising is coming from liver yin and kidney yin deficiency, you're going to see the typical manifestations for liver yang rising, and you're going to see these manifestations. So you might see the liver yin deficiency manifestations like the dry throat, the dry eyes, the without coating tongue, and then you'll also see kidney yin deficiency manifestations. So you'll see backache, scanty urination, night sweating, and the tongue without coating. And then lastly, with liver yang rising, we have the root of liver blood deficiency. So with liver blood deficiency, you're going to see the manifestations of liver young rising, but you're also going to see blood deficiency manifestations. So you're going to see the blurred vision, the numbness or tingling of the limbs, and the poor memory. All right, so now finally, we can do a table comparison of those two patterns in question. So on this table, we have liver young rising on the left, and then we have liver fire on the right. So with liver young rising, again, it's based on or it derives from a deficiency. So it's a deficiency that's causing the excess. It's an imbalance between yin and yang. And that imbalance is what allows the yang to rise up. So that's why it's a full/empty condition. And that's why you don't really see real heat. You just see yang rising manifestations. Unlike with liver fire blazing is a full heat condition. It's just straight up full fire. And with liver fire blazing, it comes from chronic liver qi stagnation. And that chronic liver qi stagnation eventually turns into stagnant heat. And that stagnant heat eventually turns into fire. And in terms of symptoms, the symptoms for liver young rising, they're going to vary depending on where it's derived from. So for example, in the previous slides, if it comes from kidney yin deficiency, so in addition to all those typical liver young rising manifestations that you see, like the headache, the irritability, you're also going to see the backache, maybe the scanty urination, maybe even weak knees because of the kidney involvement. And then with liver fire, it's an actual full condition. It's full, actual fire blazing. So you're going to see those full type manifestations blazing up to the face. You're going to see the red face, the red eyes, the throbbing temporal headache, and you're going to also see the irritability. But because it's fire now, that irritability is still going to be there, but it's going to be more pronounced. These emotional issues are going to be more pronounced because it's fire. And then with the tongue and the pulse, there's clear differences here. With liver young rising, you can see the deficiency conditions shown out. Like for example, if it's derived from blood deficiency, you're going to see a pale tongue. If it's derived from yin deficiency, you're going to see a tongue without coating. On the other hand, with liver fire blazing, it's a full condition. So we have fire then. So therefore, that's why we have a red tongue body with even redder sides. And then we have the dry yellow tongue coating. Because number one, it's fire. And number two, that fire has dried up the body fluids. That's why there's dryness. And then in terms of the pulse, we're going to see a wiry pulse for both liver young rising, and we're going to see it with liver fire blazing. But the difference with liver fire blazing is that we're going to see also a rapid pulse. That rapid pulse is indicative of heat, or in this case, fire. And then lastly, we have treatment principles. So with the treatment principles, because their root causes are different, you're going to see differences in how to treat them. In other words, a difference in the treatment principles. And treatment principles are really important for our acupuncture board exams. So for treatment principles of liver young rising, we see both a subdue and we see a nourish. We see subdue because of liver young rising. That's liver young rising in terms of an excess condition. And then we see nourish because of deficiency. So we could either have yin deficiency or blood deficiency. So we want to nourish the yin or nourish the blood. And then with liver fire blazing, it's a full condition altogether. So we have here, drain that fire. We also have clear the liver. Because it's liver fire blazing, it's a full condition. So we have a treatment principle to drain all that excess out of the body. All right, and that brings us to the end of this episode. I really hope that you found tremendous value out of it. And again, I have to remind you of my email list. I hope you sign up for my email list. Every week with each theory-based episode, you get study guides to your email. And then you're also part of a monthly study guide rotation. So you're not going to miss any of the study guides if you're a new subscriber. So please sign up for the email list if you haven't already. And if you find value with the email list, please tell your classmates. You're all in school. Share the wealth of any good resources that you have. And I hope you consider Study Acupuncture with me to be a good resource. So please go to www.studyacuwithme.com in order to sign up for that email list. All right, everyone. Until next time, God bless and happy studying.